The movie apparently is not very good. I haven't seen it yet. I would be shocked if it were. Again, the star, Rachel Zegler, is unbelievably charmless in public. Studios really need to go back to what they originally did, which was tell your stars to shut up and not say things, because no one is paying to hear your star say offensive things off the screen.
Oh, man.
Hello, Disney. You're going to have to redo your film again, because this woman is a pig, and you fired Gina Carano for far less than this nonsense. I think it's fair to say that no one can stand the star of this movie.
Given all the behind-the-scenes mayhem, I expected a Frankenstein's monster were seen to be stitched together. I think a lot of these live-action updates are really hard to watch. They've really done so much stepping on rakes over the last few months with this project, where the box office is just not going to recover.
Controversy has been dogging this movie since the very beginning. So much so that the Daily Wire, I think we played a major role in basically forcing Disney to go reshoot it. Well, it didn't help, apparently. Disney's Snow White.
I know that you've told me before that your version of Snow White is different, and it's more of a 2022 version of Snow White. What did you mean by that?
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
Neither of them make any sense for their roles. We've already covered how Rachel Zegler is a terrible choice for Snow White. Nothing about her says Snow White, and that's even leaving aside the fact that she openly detests the story, as she's said many times during this disastrous PR campaign. But Gal Gadot, who plays the Queen, the first problem is that she's the evil queen. The evil queen is supposed to be envious of Snow White's beauty, and that is just not believable. It is just not, even in a movie with magical mirrors and dwarves and all that, in a fairy tale, that strains my ability to suspend disbelief. I cannot buy that Gal Gadot is angry that she's not as beautiful as Rachel Zegler. I cannot buy that.
Breaking updates, very important. Snow White, there's been an enormous amount of controversy surrounding Snow White, obviously.
It's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
Saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about
she's gonna die.
true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can.
I came back, the losses were around $4 billion a year.
Well, I know this point has been made, but this truly is the worst casting maybe in the history of the film industry. Has there been a film with worse casting than this? And I don't just mean the Snow White actress. Obviously, she's terrible, but both of them.
There are a lot of reasons you have to suspend disbelief when you watch a movie like Snow White. You know, there's magic, and there's talking forests and animals that act in human ways and such. But probably the biggest aspect of disbelief you have to suspend is the idea that Gal Gadot, as the wicked witch here, as the evil stepmother, is somehow less good looking than Rachel Zegler. Come on, gang.
And if you disagree with this sentiment, just hit the unfollow button. I don't need your business.
You know, what's really interesting about this is not that this is something new. Rachel Zegler has been doing this for a very long time.
Disney didn't just remake a fairy tale. They took one of the most iconic stories in animation history, poured over $270 million into it, and turned it into one of their biggest box office disasters of all time. From the casting of Rachel Zegler and her viral interviews, to removing the dwarfs entirely, to marketing that seemed confused about what the movie even was. This wasn't just a misstep. This was a full-blown implosion. And the wildest part? All the warning signs were there from the very beginning. So how did Disney go from reinventing a classic to releasing a cautionary tale on how not to reboot a beloved story? Let's break it all down.
According to Zegler, Snow White isn't just about fairy tales. It's a tool to promote acceptance and discourage societal prejudice. Her comments come amid months of controversy surrounding the film and once again shine a spotlight on Rachel Zegler's race and how Hollywood frames diversity.
Let's be real. There's a huge difference between remaking a cult favorite and remaking a foundational film. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs isn't just old. It's the first full-length animated feature in history. It built Disney. It changed animation. And it's one of the most cherished, rewatched, and remembered stories of all time. So yeah, the pressure was on. People weren't expecting a 1:1 remake, but they were expecting something magical. Something that honored the spirit of the original, even if it added a modern twist. Instead, what they got was something that felt cynical, confused, and completely disconnected from the source. Right from the start, things felt off.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Never revisited Snow White again. So I watched it for the first time in probably 16, 17 years.
Rachel Zegler had everything going for her. A breakout role in West Side Story, a powerful voice, and a look that fits Disney's princess mold. But it wasn't her talent that made headlines. It was her attitude. In interview after interview, she spoke about Snow White like it was a burden. She admitted she hadn't seen the original since she was a kid. She said the prince was creepy and stalker-like. She insisted this wasn't going to be a fairy tale about falling in love, but a story about a woman who doesn't need a man. Now, there's nothing wrong with updating themes, but there's a way to do it without alienating the fanbase. And Rachel didn't find that balance. Instead, she came off like she was above the story. And when you're rebooting something sacred, that's the quickest way to lose your audience. Zegler's tone wasn't just casual, it was condescending. She joked about needing to be paid for every hour she spent wearing the princess dress. She called the original film weird, and acted like she was doing the studio a favor by showing up.
If I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed on.
Fans started asking, why cast someone who clearly doesn't care about the story she's telling? Clips from her interviews went viral, not because they were exciting, but because they made people mad. And the worst part, Disney didn't seem to have any damage control plan. They didn't address the backlash. They didn't coach her interviews. They just let it spiral, and that made it so much worse. The next bombshell, the dwarfs were gone. You know, the 7 dwarfs that are in the title? Replaced.
It showed that the dwarves were not, in fact, dwarves in Snow White and the 7 dwarves, because that would be offensive apparently to little people, so instead, they just made the dwarves normal-sized humans, which was idiotic, because that's not the story. Then they decided they couldn't actually cast, little people in these roles, so they decided to cast big people and then shrink them down using CGI, so it looks terrible.
Not with new versions, not even with side characters that fit the tone. Instead, Disney introduced magical creatures that were mostly human-sized actors CGI to look smaller. It was weird. It looked awkward, and fans hated it. The original dwarfs weren't just comic relief. They were central to Snow White's arc. They protected her, helped her grow, and became beloved characters in their own right. So why were they cut? The official reasoning pointed to concerns about stereotypes. But even Peter Dinklage, who initially criticized the original, later said the decision missed the point. Instead of improving representation, Disney just erased the characters entirely. And in doing so, they erased a huge part of the film's heart.
Rachel Zegler has been described as a walking PR disaster for Disney.
Imagine for Disney's Snow White, a movie that was projected, projections kept going down and down and down into this weekend. Finally, the final tally was 45 to 55 million domestically and over $100 million worldwide. Well, here's the result. Box office, Snow White leads with sleepy 43 million.
Let's talk numbers. This remake reportedly cost around $270 million to produce and market. That's more than Avatar made on its first film. That's Marvel money. That's Star Wars level investment. And what did Disney get for that kind of spend? Trailers that looked generic, CGI that felt unfinished, and posters so bland they barely stood out. There was no sense of magic, no buzz, no excitement. Even diehard Disney fans didn't feel hyped. And when your most loyal audience isn't on board, you're in trouble.
This is truly she has to go. I'm sorry, Disney. She has to go.
Now, one thing about Rachel Zegler is that we know that she's not helping at all one bit.
But these guys at Disney, they're not that bright, they're not that smart, and we see that because they can't come up with any new IP. Why not write some new movies? You guys sit around, you have billions of dollars, they keep going back and rewriting the classics.
This is someone who is as entitled as, I don't need your business. You know what? Maybe Disney does. Maybe you're a tool, you're a pawn in this film. You didn't write it. You didn't direct it. You have nothing to do with the creation of Snow White. Right. You should shut up and do the...
Then came opening weekend, and it tanked. Big time. Estimates were already low, around $50 million. And the film couldn't even hit that. It pulled in just $43 million, despite massive marketing, endless press, and a release window with very little competition. That wasn't just disappointing. That was catastrophic. And remember, when a film costs hundreds of millions, breaking even isn't enough. You need a massive turnout. Instead, this remake didn't even make a splash. It barely made a ripple. Here's the thing most studios forget. You can't lecture your audience while trying to sell them something nostalgic. You can't trash the past and expect people to pay to see the future. That's what made this film feel like a slap in the face. The messaging wasn't "we love this story and want to evolve it." It was, "This old story is dumb, here's a smarter one." And that made people check out. It wasn't about politics. It wasn't about diversity. It was about tone. This remake felt like it was talking down to the audience, not celebrating the story they loved. And in today's world, where everyone's watching, tweeting, and sharing, that's a recipe for disaster.
Every time she opens her mouth, it's crisis mode when it comes to Disney, having to backtrack. She talks about how this isn't a fairy tale about falling in love with the prince. This is a fairy tale about fighting your own battle.
Now, for Disney, as you probably remember, all of this publicity, the Zegler interviews, the Daily Mail leak, caused a lot of unexpected, for them anyway, pre-production problems. People weren't supposed to see and understand just how unwatchable the new Snow White was going to be. It was supposed to be, kind of a surprise, but now there was no hiding it.
This isn't just about Snow White. It's about a bigger problem. Hollywood keeps thinking that nostalgia will carry any project, even if they completely change everything people loved about it. But here's the truth. We don't mind updates. We don't even mind bold creative choices. We mind when they're done carelessly, when they feel forced, when the people involved clearly don't love the original. This remake didn't fail because it tried something new. It failed because it disrespected what came before it. You can't just strip out the soul of a story and replace it with vague empowerment and call it a day. There needs to be heart. There needs to be belief. And most of all, there needs to be love for the material. Because if the cast and creators don't believe in it, why should the audience? Disney's Snow White remake wasn't just a bad movie. It was a masterclass in how to ruin a reboot. From Rachel Zegler's interviews, to the erasure of iconic characters, to a story that no longer resembled the tale people grew up with. This film was never going to succeed, not because audiences hate change, but because they hate being ignored. If there's one thing this disaster teaches us, it's that remakes only work when they respect the original, not replace it. And if studios like Disney don't learn that lesson, they're going to keep spending hundreds of millions on box office bombs, because no amount of CGI, no amount of press tours, and no amount of modernization can replace a story with real magic. And in the end, magic is what makes people show up. Who do you think was more responsible for the downfall? Rachel Zegler, Disney's creative team, or both? Drop your take in the comments. I'm reading every single one.